Good morning. This is Kevin Neuenswander, and I'm sharing home from quarantine. So I'm talking about biblical integration, Bloom's taxonomy, and effective teaching strategies. And this is a tool that we use at Trinity Academy in Wichita, Kansas. And it's how to integrate different levels of biblical integration with levels of cognition and effective teaching strategies. So, from the beginning, let you know this is a two-part session. It's too much to do in one part, but I want to make sure that you understand and see how to use this tool. And again, it's something that we use at the, especially at the elementary school, but middle and high school uses some as well. So from the beginning too, I'd like you to know that the rubric that I based this off of is from Bob Jones University Press, developed by uh, Dr. Brian Smith. And so the different biblical integration levels are from that rubric. And so I have permission to share that with you. And anyway, it's just been really good. Also, at the end of the presentation, you will see there is a place where you can go to Teachers Pay Teachers, and you can download for a small price, download the flip chart and make your own copies. So here we go. Um, so so as a private Christian school, how do we keep biblical integration, student engagement, effective teaching strategies, and cognitive levels, or Bloom's taxonomy, all going at the same time? It feels like we're juggling. I'm sure you feel that way. How do we keep all the balls in the air? And do you ever feel like sometimes one or two are doing well, but the others are not so much, and vice versa? And my proposition to you is to integrate them all into rich, robust, and effective learning using a biblical worldview. By integrating each of these areas into one place, one flip chart, teachers and administrators can have one tool that helps us to ensure great instruction that is both deep and wide, and with rich and relevant biblical integration, and capitalizes on strong visual student engagement. And I use visual student engagement because students can be reading, being compliant, be quiet and sitting in their seats, but you really don't know what's going on inside. They could be reading, they could be thinking about they're going to have for lunch. They could be thinking about Thanksgiving or Christmas coming up. They could be thinking about, oh, mom and dad have been fighting, and so I don't feel very comfortable right now. So all different things, but how do you visually tell? And we'll talk about that in just a little bit more. So many Christian educators think about reality in terms of a two-story worldview. And again, this slide was developed by Dr. Brian Smith at BJ University Press. As you can see, there's a church on top and a home on the bottom. So it's a two-story view. The upper story deals with sacred things, prayer, godliness, church, etc. The lower story um, is on uh, is on secular things such as our work, our culture, our academics, etc. So the upper story contains things that matter to God or a Christian, and the lower story, things that more or less don't matter to God, although we really know that all things do matter to God. So, how do we solve this problem? So, a biblical worldview shaping, and that's a term that I gleaned from biblical worldview conferences put on by Bob Jones University Press. And this is not an endorsement necessarily of Bob Jones University Press. However, This is where I got the initial idea. This has been extraordinarily helpful for us at Trinity, me particular as an administrator. So biblical worldview shaping is helpful in correcting this way of thinking. So integration suggests adding the Bible to learning. So worldview, however, suggests teaching Christianly as we shape the students' perspectives on math, science, language arts, history, etc., etc. So from one story, a Christian worldview. So the goal is to have worldview shaping, so biblical integration and Bloom's taxonomy together, or cognitive levels of thinking together. Our job as Christian educators is to show and train our students how to think biblically all the areas of our lives. Um, so that being said, when I went to college in the early 80s, Bloom's taxonomy, Madeline Hunter, levels of cognition were drilled into my educational thinking. In fact, when I interviewed in Wichita um, um, as a public school teacher years ago, I had to put together lesson plans according to Madeline Hunter, according to Bloom's taxonomy. So that again lets you know where I come from. And as we move from the lowest level of remembering to the highest level of creating, we raise the depth and robustness of cognition. So there's a rubric on the left, level A, level 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, 3A, 3B, and we'll go through each one of those in just a moment. So how do we do this? How do we put them together? So biblical integration, or BI, and levels of cognition, LC. So the Bloom's taxonomy revised, so it has remembering as the lowest level. So it's a recollection of previously learned material by recalling facts, terms, basic concepts, and answers. Understanding, so you can demonstrate an understanding, not just that you know it, can repeat it, but you can demonstrate an understanding of facts and ideas. Application, can you put that understanding to use? So you solve problems to new situations. Analyzing, so you examine and break information into parts and you make inferences. Evaluate, you present and defend opinions by making judgments about information. And then creating, so that's putting together as you're creating new things, so compiling information, by proposing alternative solutions. So here we go. The idea behind the biblical instrument is the degree of connection between the Bible and what is being taught. So each one of these levels are useful if used correctly. So you'll notice that as the biblical integration level rise on the level of cognition doesn't necessarily increase the same way. So level A, there is no connection between or little connection between the Bible or biblical thinking and cognition. Uh, BJU calls it level 0, although this has had a negative connotation for my staff and for me. So I call it level A. So it's receiving knowledge that is the lowest level. And so level 1 is surface connection, and it would be analyzing. Level 1. Level 2 is deeper connection. Level 3 is even deeper connection. And when paired with the different levels of Bloom's, they become powerful tools for biblical integration and levels of cognition. This is helpful to us as become Christian schools that are strong in biblical worldview shaping and academic rigor. Okay, so However, I want to give a caution with biblical integration and levels of cognition. So, just as level of cognition is appropriate depending on what is being taught, so biblical integration follows suit. Teachers need to know that they aren't expected to use all the levels of biblical integration for each lesson. Now, for example, I'm in the classrooms a lot. We have a tool actually that's it's called an e-walkthrough tool, and it's through Southwestern Educational group in southwestern Kansas. But there's a group of Christian schools here in Kansas and Missouri that use this tool. So I'll walk in and I'll spend about 5 minutes in the classroom. I'll record on my iPad some what level of cognition I'm seeing, level of biblical integration. I look at the level of engagement, what kind of things I'm seeing. I kind of what's called walk the walls. I say, do I see student workup? Do I see this extension cords where kids can trip? All different kinds of things. So as I'm looking through, and I have comment boxes at the bottom, and I can type in comments. So I leave that information. When I leave the classroom, I can send that as an email right to the teacher. And so we use this every time I go into the classroom. I do not take in the my iPad. So and you don't have to do that kind of walkthroughs as an administrator, or with this tool. But this tool, as you train the teachers on how to do it, biblical integration is to be used at the discernment and skill of the teacher. So I let my staff know again that I'm not expecting to see the highest levels of either every time that I enter the classroom. Also, sometimes they are planned and sometimes they happen at the leading of the Holy Spirit. So, teachers should plan their lessons with biblical integration and levels of cognition in mind. I did that as a teacher as well, but they should also be sensitive to the questions and comments of their students and the Holy Spirit. Because as a teacher, things come up when they come up. So as you're teaching something and a student, it brings something up, not like, oh, my dog had puppies, but it brings up something that's related to the real life and real world of what's happening. So there will undoubtedly be times when the unplanned happens as God speaks through the students and to the teachers. So again, this can be planned, but this comes up often. So many times I'm in a teacher's classroom and something happens. One of those questions comes up, or the teacher has from the sense of Holy Spirit, he or she comes up with just a great biblical integration piece. That's so exciting. So here's just a tool that might be helpful to you. This chart shows how the rubric is put together. So I begin with the lesson objective, and I add a level of cognition and the level of biblical integration. And then finally, you'll see that I have added some suggestions, and they're not specifically needed for biblical integration and levels of cognition. But these are suggestions of learning activities teachers can do. And again, these are at the back part of many of them, not all of them, are at the back part of my flip chart. So the same teaching learning strategy can be used for different levels of each. For example, let's look at level 2A. So Spanish was the lesson lesson objective, not objection. I apologize. So my first year at Trinity, when I was preparing to start the K through 8, I was the original K through 8 principal. I helped to design the school from curriculum, hiring teacher, design the building. So all that amazing kind of work I got to do. But the first year I taught Spanish 2 at the high school. Before I was an administrator, I was a music, French, and Spanish teacher, pre-K through high school at different times. So I was teaching, the lesson objective was students will write about their life using preterite and imperfect past tense. Spanish has two past tense, preterite and imperfect. Preterite happens like in a point, like I ate yesterday. Imperfect is it happens for like a cycle. So I ate in the cafeteria all of last year. So that happened over and over and over again. So the application level was that students, I had them write their testimony in Spanish to share with the lost. So I taught them how to write in 3 different paragraphs their testimony in English. So we talked about what was their life before Christ, the life that what happened, their conversion, and then the third paragraph was what happened after their conversion. So life after their conversion. So they had to use preterite and imperfect tense. Well, so that kind of merging together of biblical integration with a lesson objective and with application level of cognition. And I used a bubble map. And we'll see bubble map in the next slide. And you guys, I'm sure you have seen it. Maybe you haven't called it bubble map before, but this is a way of thinking. So we'll go to the next slide. These are some learning strategies, some things that I have included at the back of the flip chart. So the bubble map, I'm going to put my mouse over here. That's this right here. So we put here was conversion. Here was, or here's, conversion. Here was before, and then here was, I would have bubbles here. This was at conversion, and this would be after conversion. So they got to put some different verbs, some different words here, preterite words, imperfect words, and then we use this bubble map to help them think it through. So I could see, so as I walked around and I saw what they were doing, they were writing, they were using this down. The students were highly engaged as they used this. So anyway, some cooperative learning things. We're going to talk about numbered heads together in just a little bit. Possibly, and you're familiar with brainstorming and focused reading. I think we're going to talk about that just a little bit. But anyway, so this allows the 3 different types of visual engagement. So are they speaking? Are students writing? Or are students doing something? So if they're speaking or writing or doing, excuse me, then you know that they are engaged in what they're doing. So we've tied together higher order thinking skills, biblical integration, and teaching strategies, good learning and teaching strategies all together. So this way you know that they're not just compliant. So here's the way that you're going to see each one of the different levels of biblical integration. So first, it has the level of integration at the bottom. Then key words. So these are key words for the levels of cognition. So these key verbs, if you are familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, they have key verbs for each level. Here are the questions. These are question sims or prompts or question starters to help begin asking questions that combine the topic area with both biblical integration and level of cognition. Here you have the strategies that I just talked about. So these are learning and teaching strategies to ensure student engagement and cognition. And this kind of tells you what the students will demonstrate. So On the second slide, you will have examples, and we're going to look at specific examples from the different topic and different subject areas as we go. So here is the second slide. An example, like I gave one from history, praising God for his providence in the rise of all nations, and math. And these are different levels, by the way. That's why they're different colors. So each level has a specific color. Now I'm colorblind, so it might not be as helpful for me, but I am also a visual learner. So these different colors have been very helpful for all of us as we learn different levels of biblical integration and levels of cognition. So here's the first one, level A, biblical content, but no integration. So students demonstrate a recall of previously learned material, calling to mind facts, answers, basic concepts, and vocabulary. So the key words: define, find, list, recall, tell, when, where, which, relate, show, label. So these are just the very lowest level of cognition. However, they are very important and very important and appropriate as you're learning new material. So some of the STEM question starters: how did what so and so happen? When did this happen? Who is, what is, where is, who was? Can you recall? Can you list the four? Can you select? So those words. Some strategies there: find someone who, inside outside circle, number heads together. So and you'll see those circle maps, brace maps. So you'll see those on some of the flip chart. So questions there, and here's some of the examples. So home economics: how did the feeding of the 5,000 happen? So if you just read that and you are doing or the reading, and you have a group of 4 or 6 kids together, group, you number them off. So this would be numbered heads together. We talked about a couple slides ago. So number 1 would share first, and then number 2, then number 3, and then number 4, and around the circle. And as they were doing that, you could have someone scribe, you can have the kids write what the other kids are saying. So you know that they're engaged because they're talking and they're writing. And then you choose one person from each group to share. How did the feeding of the 5,000 happen? History: when did the destruction of Jerusalem happen? Now, that's not specifically in the Bible. Well, it actually is. It depends on which time you're talking about. 70 AD is not in there, but the destruction of Jerusalem when they were attacked by the Babylonians, and the temple was destroyed. So certainly that happened during the Bible era. So Bible: who was the first king of Israel? Music: can you recall some of the music instruments mentioned in the Bible? English language arts: why did God scatter the people of Babel and confused the language of the whole world? Now, if that was an inference, that would be a higher order thinking. However, it tells us plainly in the Bible why God did that. So they're not making an inference. So lowest level. So that's level A. Level 1A would be the keywords: compare, contrast, correlate, inference, juxtapose. So some of the questions: would it be better if? Now that's making an inference. How would you categorize? What is the relationship between? So what inference can you make? Again, there's inference. Can you distinguish between? How is blank related to blank? What are the parts or features of blank that relate to blank? So what ideas justify? So some strategies: brainstorming, learning partners. So let's go to the next slide. So you see it's biblical analogy. So this is the analogy part. So noting that something in the academic matter is similar to something in the Bible. Be careful and choosy, because if you use this too often, it loses its meaning, and it is always marginal and requires a detour. So, because what I mean by requires a detour, you have to stop what you're doing and go into the scriptures, which is great, but you don't want to do that all the time. Analogies. This is the Bloom's analogy piece. Students compare between two or more things. It is akin to metaphor and simile. An example would be, just as you reap what you sow in the garden, you reap what you sow in your life choices. So let's look at some examples. Science. What is the relationship between a butterfly's metamorphosis and God transforming a Christian life? Wow, great. Making an inference. Music. How would you categorize the instruments in the orchestra as compared to Adam's categorizing organisms by naming them in Genesis 2? Health. As physical exercise has some value in keeping us healthy, what is the function of spiritual exercise? And they're going deeper. That's a deeper question. 1 Timothy 4:8. Math. How does the strength of a triangle compare to the strength of hearing from God through prayer, His word, in this church, the three-sided triangle? God's word at the bottom, prayer on one side, and church or community on the other side. How does that keep us strong in our walk with God? And grammar. Compare the consistency of tense with use with the consistency of one's walk with God. So here you see this takes us into a deeper level. Um, Now, 1B is referencing the Bible, and the words apply, construct, identify, explain, organize, solve, define, describe. So, questions. What can you find to? How would you apply what you learned to develop? How would you organize to show what would result if? And you notice that the different colors, um, the words in the questions, if it's word from the word bank on the left, I use that, I color that word. So some other strategies. So let's look at biblical examples. So locating instances of academic subject in the Bible, it points out actual instances. It is good for demonstrating relevance. Application level as students solve problems to new situations by applying acquired knowledge, facts, and rules in a different way. So let's look at some examples. History. So the record the fall of Babylon, or the record of the fall of Babylon. Um, Science, Adam's categorizing organisms by name. Literature, dramatic irony in the Joseph Judah story and Genesis 42 through 48. Math, evidence of pi in the building of the temple, 1 Kings 7:23. So describe and identify are the two. Music, identifying music instruments used in worship, and cooking, using herbs for flavor. So you're describing. So that is only the second to the lowest um, uh, level of cognition. Starting with level 2A, responding with the Bible. This is we did last time level A, which is no biblical integration. Level 1A is the next is a biblical referencing the Bible. Level 1B is also referencing the Bible, but taking it on a deeper level. And then we're ready with responding with the Bible 2A. So the key words over here for that level of cognition are apply, choose, develop, identify, make use of, plan, solve, construct, interview, model, select. And some of the question starters using some of those key words, those key verbs, or how would you apply? What examples would you choose to show? How would you show your understanding of? Identify what facts would you select to show. What approach would you use to? What would result if? What questions would you ask in an interview with? And so some of the strategies are the same as the last one in the next two. Brainstorming, learning partners, museum tour, and numbered heads together, ordered sharing. So I'm not going to go through each of those, but hopefully you would see those. If you do the download, you can make copies. And I received permission, just as a reminder, from Bob Jones University Press, BJU Press, to share all this and put it on Teachers Pay Teachers so that anyone can download if they want. So very gracious of Bob Jones University Press. This is not a I'm not doing an advertisement for them. I guess that's the right word, but they helped me start this process of putting everything together, and for them, I'm so grateful. So the next slide is responding with the Bible. So serving with the discipline, the rounded square on the left. So it's using the academic matter to become more effective in obeying the creation mandate. And loving your neighbor, make sure that you have academic rigor. So this is a piece that makes sure that the academics is tied in. So this is the application level. It's a deeper connection. So real world learning. Students solve problems to new situations by applying acquired knowledge, facts, and rules in a different way. So let's look at some examples. Science. How would you apply what you've learned about tornadoes to build safer buildings? Wow, that's a good one. Matthew 5:16. Language arts. What would you include as you write a poem to help others handle death? My son-in-law, Caleb, just yesterday or day before yesterday, his grandfather died of COVID. So what would Caleb include if or I would include if I wrote a poem about how others could handle death? And I haven't done that, but that's something. If I did for my son-in-law Caleb, that would be at the application level. Mathematical modeling in weather prediction. Now, I know they do a lot of modeling. So there wasn't supposed to be any wind today, and it's really windy. So it's not always right, but they do use it for predictions, of course. And I'm poking at meteorologists just a bit, but that's what they do. They use math to help a weather prediction for our safety to keep us safe. History, explaining a Christian view of nations' history. So Acts 13, Acts 17. So right now, huge push in some of our culture to rewrite the history of our country. Well, we know that we have a strong Christian, Judeo-Christian background and view that set up our whole governance in our nation. So that would be an example if I was to talk about that for history. Spanish students write their testimonies in Spanish to share with the lost. And that's something I already shared, what I did with my Spanish 2 students with past tense. And the other piece of that is that we learned the Romans Road in Spanish. So we practice sharing the gospel in Spanish. We practice sharing that with each other. But we use Spanish, and it's tied together, the academics with the biblical integration. Music, composing a piece of music using Habakkuk 3:17 through 18 to help those worried about COVID-19. One of my favorite scriptures talks about God's care for us. And, right now with COVID-19, Wichita, Kansas, where I live, and right now we have the highest level of COVID cases in the nation right now. It was just on Fox News yesterday. But how would I use that? And in my quiet times, I've been looking at that scripture. So if I were to compose music, and as a former music teacher, I've composed a lot of music in the past, and that's something I could do. So um, here is another example. So I hear from many people, and it's true. It is true if we think about it. Math is the hardest subject to integrate. If we look at math as a sterile um, basics of facts. However, John Lennox, one of my favorite apologists, is a mathematician at Oxford. Um, he talks very passionately about how math can be used to show the glory of God. So dominion modeling for math. So using a word problem. So Maurice's crew built a Habitat for Humanity one family house in Wichita, Kansas, with an 812 pitched roof. And the width of the building, including the eaves, is 118 feet. Find the height to the ridge. H. Then use the Pythagorean theorem to find, okay, the math part. I'm not very good at math. And I took part of this from one of the textbooks at Bob Jones University Press with their math. I love it. The fact that even in the word problem, it ties in math into using service, serving others for the glory of God. Dominion modeling again. Susan's crew flew to the Dominican Republic to help rebuild after severe earthquake damage. They built concrete stairs in one of the new buildings. The plan proposed a rise of 118 inches and a run of 150 inches. And it goes on. But you see, it's using service, it's using putting others before ourselves in a math problem. That's dominion modeling for math. So serving with the discipline. So exciting. So next we have responding with the Bible. So keywords: adapt, build, compile, create, design, develop, estimate, imagine, improve, modify, plan, predict, solve. So some of the key question starters: can you invent? How would you improve? How would you adapt blank to create a different blank? What would you what way would you design? How could you change or modify the plot or plan? Can you propose an alternative? Can you think of an original way for the blank? And what facts can you compile? So some of the strategies are the same. So now if we look at responding to the Bible, so worshiping with the discipline, use the academic matter to declare God's glory. So I really am a fan of the early Benedictine model. Now, I'm a Baptist. I don't go to an Orthodox church, and I don't go to a Catholic church. And I'm not saying anything against them. What I'm saying is, I've got through reading from the early Christian fathers and mothers, talk about the Benedictine monastery. And one of the things they talk about is having a rule of life. So a rule of life is something that happens. So I have a certain way that I live every day. The first thing I do, I get up and I read one or two chapters in the New Testament just to focus my mind on Jesus. Then afterwards, I take a shower and I dedicate every part of my body, as my hair, as I wash my hair, and down to my feet. And then, so I have a rule of life for my day as I go through, as I'm doing uh, parking lot duty. I can pray for my family and so on. So, but worshiping the discipline. One of the things they talk about is ora and labora. So that's prayer and work, and really concentrating on using work, using what we do to glorify and worship God. So that's creating, assembling information in a way by joining elements in a new pattern or proposing alternative solutions. So let's look at some examples. With art, making religious icons to move people towards worship. Language arts, skillfully writing in a prayer journal. Writing, write your own psalm of praise to God. Math, using the mathematic concept of infinity to declare God's greatness. So you really worship God with that. History, praising God for his providence in the rise and fall of the nations. At just the right time, Alexander the Great conquered, so Greek was a common language, and then the Pax Romana, at just the right time. There were roads that went all over Europe and Asia. And so when Paul and the other apostles and disciples went to share the gospel, there was a common language. There was safety traveling on roads all thousands of miles. So all these things came. So in the United States, God's providence in the rise and fall of the nations. So history. Music, arranging a psalm into a worship song or hymn. Science, marveling at God's power and goodness in complex ecosystem. So this is another one with history. First, writing. We can write our prayers as a way to remember what we have said to God. We can tell others about goodness by writing about the ways he has answered prayer. And then here with science, on the left side of that picture is a photo of the stained glass rose window from York Minster Cathedral in Yorkshire, England. On the right is a cross section of a strand of human DNA. Isn't that amazing? So we can map out the human genome and in it see the evidence of a creator, a great creator. And we can plan and now see a great planner. So look at that cross section of the double helix. It's more impressive than the stained glass window on the left, which is impressive anyway. But that I look at that and I worship, thinking, wow, look at that. None of that could have happened on accident. Neither side, the left side or the right side, but just using that to honor and worship God. That's an amazing thing. So going into the highest levels, 3A and 3B. So that's evaluating the premises. So 3A, the words, appraise, assess, word, award, deduct, defend, evaluate, explain, inference, interpret, judge, justify, opinion, recommend, support, survey, value, the word bank. Questions based on what you know. How would you explain? Or what data would you use to make the conclusion blank? How would you prove blank? What judgment would you make about? And then I'm not going to go through all of those. So some of the strategies we talked: brainstorming, carousel, feedback, fan and pick, rally robin. That's a Kagan cooperative learning. Now, I did not put Kagan cooperative learning structures in here because I don't have permission to do that. But if you go online, we use in our building Kagan cooperative learning strategies. I use those in my staff meetings. And by the way, all of these strategies, or many of these strategies, I model them in my staff meetings for my teachers. So they see us use it. So they have context, and many of them knew how to do them before they came to Trinity, and not all of them, but they knew many of them, and I have them teach each other at times. So let's look at evaluating the premises. So remembering the fallenness of man's mind, identifying and calling into question the assumptions of an academic discipline, what we don't believe, and evaluating, display, and defend views and opinions by making conclusions about information, quality of work, or strengths of ideas. So let's look at some examples. So art, rejecting the belief of nihilism when looking at modern art. You know, I love art. I'm an artist myself. And there are some modern art pieces that I look at, and they look like an elephant at the zoo was flinging paint and did it. And their their nihilistic view is that nothing matters, that nothing matters, and so that there's no truth. And so some of the artwork that is like that. So rejecting the belief, language arts rejecting the objectivity of truth or postmodernism, science rejecting the belief that all life came from chance. And the windows we just looked at, and the cross strand of the double helix. Um, how can you say that uh, all life came from chance? So, history affirming early hominid development in East Africa, math affirming that math is completely objective or certain. You know, my friends that are atheistic that say that there is no objective truth, and but they will say that, well, but mathematics is constant. And so as I ask, well, where does that come from? And they have to just kind of hang their hat in the air to do that. So music, listening to the music of John Cage and affirming that there is no such thing as objective truth. Now, John Cage is a contemporary composer. He was. I don't think he's composing anymore. The people hated his music because it was completely random. And he lived, it talks about nihilism. However, he's one of the, it's funny because he's one of the world's greatest experts on mushrooms. Um, and every time a angel of death mushroom will kill you. It doesn't sometime, and it does sometime. It always will make you deathly ill, or it leads to death. Or the morel mushroom, my favorite, is never poisonous. The false morale is. And but we can't live life that way. If we lived life saying that there is no objective truth, I mean, we just can't. So anyway, um some more examples. Science: if man is just an evolved animal, why is it wrong to kill men but not other animals? Assuming you're not a vegan. So, social studies, bumper stickers. Do you agree or disagree with the sticker, life sucks, and then you die? Or it's a dog eat dog world? How would you support your belief through scripture? And history, there's a common belief in our culture that science and Christianity stand against each other. How would you defend against this ideology? Well, apologetics is great. It works into this for sure. So the last is rebuilding with the Bible. So word bank, adapt, build, change, compile, compose, create, design, estimate, formulate, imagine, improve, modify, plan, propose, solve, suppose. So questions: how would you improve? What would happen if? How would you, or can you propose an alternative? How would you adapt blanks to create a different blank? How could blank be done, or how, to minimize or maximize? So, and I'm not going to go through all of those, but you can see strategies are exactly the same. Those mind maps and other strategies there. So let's go into rebuilding with the Bible. So sanctifying the student's thinking with a particular academic sphere by rebuilding the discipline with premises derived from a Christian worldview. What we do believe. The other is what we don't believe. And this is what we do believe. So you're creating, so assembling information together in a different way by combining elements in a new pattern, proposing alternative solutions. So some examples: language arts, affirming the reality of a revealed truth. So telling what we do believe. Math: what inference can you make from the consistency of God and the consistency of the Pythagorean theorem? Is it always the same? Does the Pythagorean theorem change? Is it the same today but not tomorrow? So history, exhorting students to consider passages like Psalms 2, 10 through 12. All governmental officials are to submit to the kingship of Christ. Science, how would you use creationary science to affirm creation and the flood? So you see that it's what we do believe. Music, how do you take a rap song and design a new type of hymn? See that? The creative piece. Bible, what evidence can you find that affirms the reality of revealed truth? So I hope this is helpful. And at the end, in the bibliography, you will see that I have a link to Teacher Pay Teachers. If you would like this, a flip chart, you can go on and download it and you can use this. I hope this has been helpful, and I hope you feel free to use this in parts at staff meetings, or if you want to get a hold of me, my contact information is also in here. So if you would like to get a hold of me, if you would like to use this to share it with your staff, again, to download this, I hope that it has been helpful for you. Thank you.